The voice of sharing, 居然那想。
ASEAN Dailies. First and foremost news from Southeast Asia.
Welcome back to Durian ASEAN, the voice of discovery and sharing. You're with Grace at ASEAN Dailies, where we deliver news from Southeast Asia. We apologize for the late in the ASEAN Dailies. However, we'll start from now on Tuesday morning. So there was this news about plane crash, and also a lot of speculation has been spreading out. So perhaps there will be external influence when it comes to this plane crash that just happened a few days ago. So apparently the Russian airline Kogal Mafia has blamed external influence for last week's Sinai's plane crash, which also killed over 200 people. So according to a senior airline official said, the only reasonable explanation is that there was external influence. Of course, the investigation is still going on by aviation experts using this data from the aircraft black boxes has yet to give these conclusions. The head of Russia's Federal Aviation Agency mentioned that it was premature to speculate on the cause of crash yet. And he also said this kind of talk is not based on any proper facts. And of course, Egyptian President Abdel Fattah el-Sisi also mentioned during the interview with the BBC that it was too early to say what had caused this crash. And he called the claim from jihadis allies to the so-called Islamic State group that they had brought down this plane propaganda. And he also said this is one way to damage the stability and security of Egypt and also the image of Egypt as well. So there will be more stories about this crash, and such as there are 4 theories about this crash apparently, and also what we know about this crash so far, and who are these victims behind it, and also how this Russian media they been telling, also analyzing this cause of air crash. Moving on to the next news, which is about Malaysia. Apparently, Malaysia opposition Anwar Ibrahim should be freed. The UN body says the sodomy conviction of Malaysian opposition leader. Of course, this story has been going on for a long time, and this was politically motivated, and he should be released immediately. And of course, this is according to UN. So, Mr. Anwar was jailed for 5 years, which was just in February this year, and he and his family say this case was brought to keep him out of this politics. And they also have welcomed what they say is the working group's conclusion, which they believe it sends a clear and also unequivocal message to Prime Minister Najib Razak that this sharp decline in human rights under his administration will not go unnoticed. Of course, and also the government, of course, argues that Mr. Ibrahim conviction is a matter for the Malaysian courts to found him guilty after the exhaustive legal process spanning many years. And the findings by this UN about this Malaysian government in a specific case, working group on arbitrary detention basically solidified their position that he is innocent and the victim of politically motivated persecution. So more news will be coming after this short break, so stay tuned.
ASEAN Dailies. First and foremost news from Southeast Asia.
Welcome back to Durian ASEAN, the voice of discovery and sharing. You're with Grace.
Hi, this is Gowri.
And we are at ASEAN Dailies. We deliver news from Southeast Asia. Now let's focus on the political news. So we just talked about the Anwar's release according to the UN. And Gowri, I want to ask you about this particular news. It's been going on for a long time in Malaysia. And then UN says it was just a politically motivated action. So that's why our political leader, opposition leader, needs to be released.
I think there's a lot of controversies definitely surrounding Anwar Ibrahim's case. Even in Malaysia itself, it's such a hot topic, and it happened twice as well.
Right.
One time when he was acquitted, and then he was charged again, and the second time he was actually found guilty. And a lot of people in Malaysia saw that move as sort of like the end of the justice system, or end of justice at all in the legal system in Malaysia. There's been a lot of different groups as well carrying out their own findings, their own research, and the conclusion was that Mr. Anwar was denied access to a fair trial, that a lot of evidence were biased. The judge was biased, including the chief prosecutor, and a lot of working groups have also been urging the Malaysian government to immediately release Mr. Anwar and reinstate all his political rights. And there's also been a lot of cases where he's not being treated well in the prison as well, that he's not being given his medications, giving his meals, and a lot of people said that he is being tortured or being treated in a very cruel way.
Right, that's what we heard so far. And of course, from his family's side also has complained about his being held in the very filthy jail, and also he's not being treated properly, like you mentioned, because he's apparently going through a pain and chronic back trouble as well. So all these cases, I mean, no matter what he did, as long as he is in the jail, needs to be taken care of properly. And then this case, and again, it has become sort of international news again. And hope that we can hear some positive news from regarding this story as well as incident.
Well, his lawyer would disagree with you because he said realistically he doesn't think that the Malaysian government will do anything to release him. But it's good that there has been pressure from the UN itself. And also his daughter has been coming up with a lot of activities and constantly reminding everyone that her father is in jail for the wrong reasons, as they call it, and she's constantly fighting for his release as well, and also calling out to the UN to put more pressure on the Malaysian government to make sure that justice is served. There's no reaction yet from our Prime Minister Najib. But the case, like I said, is the second conviction for Anwar, and it's because of sodomy and corruption charges, but it's widely viewed as politically motivated. So let's wait and see what's the outcome of this.
Yeah, for sure. And apparently this UN working group is a 5-member body currently made up of all these experts from Australia, Benin, Mexico, South Korea, and Ukraine. So hope that we'll update on this news, of course, in the future, in near future. Let's move on to the next news about South Korea. Japan leaders, they had a meeting to seek this early resolution of this comfort women dispute. Well, when you mention about this comfort woman, of course, it goes back to our history era where Japan and also conquered South Korea as well as the other region in Southeast Asia as well. And that's when all this the vocab comfort woman came about, how these men, military men, sort of made use of women in the Korea and also around that regions.
Right, and according to Prime Minister Shinzo Abe, he said that regarding the issue of comfort women, I believe that we should not leave behind difficulties for future generations as we try to build a future-oriented cooperative relationship, he told reporters in Seoul. And of course, this whole issue about comfort women, where women were being forced into prostitution during the Japanese wartime, and that has caused a feud and also a lot of troubles,
Bitterness.
between these two countries.
Yeah.
And he also announced that the agreement after the first formal talks between the two leaders, since they both took office, as they seek to move beyond that bitter history that they share and that has also been haunting their relationship.
Yeah, but that's very true. And of course, because of that, there's always a tension between these two countries, Japan and South Korea. And of course, they were there not to only talk about the comfort room and how to resolve this problem, but they were also there to talk about South China Sea as well. So Abe also raised the issue of this tension in South China Sea with talks with Park, President of Korea, saying that it was the cause for the international concern. Also, Tokyo also wanted to cooperate with Seoul and also Washington to ensure this freedom of the seas as well.
I think Japan and South Korea have a very important relationship with each other, and it's great that they are coming together to resolve some of the issues, pressing issues that has been sort of plaguing the relationship for so long. One of it is the comfort woman, as we mentioned, and the other one is the South China Sea as well. It's interesting that Prime Minister Abe also raised issue about the South China Sea because it is an international concern, although it doesn't directly involve Japan. It does affect everyone who is pretty much around that rim. And also, since there is a U.S. warship now that is sailing around China's man-made islands in South China Sea, it's becoming, I think the U.S. presence is becoming more significant in this region, especially around that area, and because of that, it's also causing Prime Minister Shinzo Abe to be quite concerned about the safety of his country.
For sure. Well, let's move on to the next news about Thailand. Well, Thailand has been going under this military rule for some time already, and apparently these Thai soldiers, they warned the daughter of the assassinated this commander that not to do anything to disturb this country after she staged as a symbolic protest in the support of this outcast former Prime Minister Yingluck Shinawatra. And of course, this story is another sort of a viral and also pretty much popular stories that's been going on, quite scandalous at the same time. Yeah.
And I think besides that, what she did also, that she posted comments critical of the junta leader, Prime Minister Prayut Chan-o-cha, which prompted the warning as well. And they wanted to meet her over comments that she posted and tell her not to do anything about the country. And I think this is something that is very, how do I say it should not be happening, because as much as the military coup is happening in Thailand at the moment, I think Prime Minister Prayut Chan-o-cha has come forward so many times to assure everyone that his government will be a fair government to all, and he is always looking at how he can make his people happy in very bizarre ways. But at the same time, he's also very adamant or very particular about his position in Thailand at the moment, and there's been a lot of rules as well that there cannot be a gathering of more than 2 or 3 people. That's illegal. You're not supposed to read certain books in Thailand, and all this, I think that's right. So all this is sort of holding Thailand back from moving forward, and also they're supposed to have an elections, but we have not really heard much about that so far. All we know is that Prayut Chan-o-cha is still in charge, and he will not take any comments that goes against him.
And that also raised another question: where is the really true of justice and the democracy that's supposed to be practiced in this country? Well, that's the end of our political news from Southeast Asia. We'll come back after this short break, so stay tuned.
ASEAN Dailies. First and foremost news from Southeast Asia.
Welcome back to Durian ASEAN, the voice of discovery and sharing. You're still with Grace.
Hi, good morning. This is Gowri.
At the ASEAN Dailies, we deliver news from Southeast Asia. So let's focus on economical news from Southeast Asia. So first news is about TPP, and as well as how the president of Indonesia really wants to follow this TPP agreement, apparently.
And yeah, with the growth rates actually in the leading ASEAN economies slowing, Indonesia's decision to join the TPP may be a much needed boost to trade and growth in the region. And it seems like President Joko Widodo's announcement that Indonesia would join the TPP trade agreement was quite a welcome surprise. In the final years of the Widodo period, actually, protectionist interests came to the fore, and agreements to open markets among ASEAN were suspended. And I think even Jokowi at first, he stressed a lot about domestic policies and how he's going to focus on people first, and he didn't seem very welcome towards outside,
TPP.
Whether it was a free trade agreement or even ASEAN itself. I remember there were a lot of criticism surrounding him that Indonesia might even leave ASEAN because he was not really paying much attention to international affairs. But I guess at the end of the day, as a president, he needs to do his part, whether he likes it or not. And in the recent light, he has actually somehow opened up to be more receptive towards the TPP. Probably also because he just came back from the US and it has somehow influenced him.
Right, perhaps, and this is very important for all Southeast Asian countries when it comes to free trade agreement. That of course, Indonesia should not be the exceptional case, being out of this agreement. So it is good that Joko Widodo shares the same vision, and also he's paying attention more, especially when Japan joins the largest this regional trade agreement. So hope that so far he's quite happy and being quite progressive when it comes to TPP agreement, and there will be lots of course ups and downs when it comes to free labor movement and other sorts when it comes to sharing the goods, and even when it comes to companies coming from foreign countries to domestic industry here. However, this is for all good cause, we believe, and also when it comes to Indonesia, they are really hoping a lot from Korea, Taiwan, Singapore, and Hong Kong as well, which they really focus on the building position as global traders, utilizing this low labor cost as well.
Right. And speaking of Asian economic slowing down, I think one of the biggest effect that we've been feeling is definitely China's economy, as well as other ASEAN countries as well. And the question that has popped is what happened to that whole East Asian urge? Like you mentioned, a lot of countries has been on the competitive edge, but in the recent few months, a lot of them have been slowing down as well. And Indonesia actually also has a lot to do with dampening it. And when it comes to the biggest economy in the association, Indonesia actually accounts for 1/3 of the total ASEAN GDP, and it has for the past 5 years. So it's maybe not much of a surprise by Singapore, Malaysia, Vietnam, and Brunei to join the TPP, and the fact that it has also somehow turned heads in Jakarta. And this might actually be a positive move to make Asia's competitiveness and all the countries' economy dynamic again, and to get back into that competitive age.
Really, we are really looking forward to seeing this whole region becoming very competitive in terms of global markets, and also play a very important role in supporting the growth and the trade over this over a long time, for sure. Well, let's move on to the next news about Vietnam. How this Vietnam and also Thailand, they are moving forward to become an emerging startup world. I mean, the countries. So this biggest market, Thailand and Vietnam, they have caught the fancy of these investors, and they are sensing a pretty good opportunity to open up the platform for this budding entrepreneur ecosystem in the region.
And there's a few factors actually that we're looking at here when it comes to Vietnam and Thailand's emerging startup world. A few factors. One is grasping funding opportunities, how investors and venture capitalists are actually starting to seem more keen on the Mekong region's startup ecosystem. Another one is making the most of social media, studying government policies, as well as networking with other startups. These are some of the few factors that has been the highlight as to why Thailand and Vietnam has been emerging as the next big thing in ASEAN.
And these four elements are very important when it comes to entrepreneurship as well as startups. And of course, there will be a focused session when it comes to ASEAN Summit in the few weeks or just the next week, right?
Right.
I mean, the 2 weeks, yes. So they will have a ASEAN Youth Summit, which will be mainly focusing on these opportunities and entrepreneurship as well as startups.
And I think what's really interesting that I want to mention about Thailand is that earlier this year the company launched a $10 million micro fund for Thai startups called 500 tuk-tuks, and tuk-tuks are those little trishaws you find in Thailand, and it seems that they are actually sort of taking over the market in Thailand at the moment, and it's one of the most prominent startups as well. And even in Vietnam, they are going to invest in up to 20 startups over the next 12 months, and this 500 tuk-tuks, which was launched in April 2015, will actually be developing early stage startups in Thailand as well, and they will be also looking at how they can use software technology to make the most out of the 500 tuk-tuk startup.
And that sounds very promising, and I hope that we can hear more news from these two countries and be able to contribute not only the domestic economy but as well as the Southeast Asia economic as well. Yes, so that's it for our economical news from Southeast Asia. We'll come back after this short break to comment and also discuss on the social culture part.
ASEAN Dailies. First and foremost news from Southeast Asia.
Welcome back to Durian ASEAN, the voice of discovery and sharing. You're with Grace.
Hi, good morning. This is Gowri.
At ASEAN Dailies, let's focus on our social cultural news. So, we have National Bird of Singapore there.
Do we?
Yes.
And it's a new kind of bird as well. We're talking about a crimson sunbird, which has been declared as the national bird of Singapore when Dr. Sean Lum, who is the president of Nature Society, announced and shared this with fellow delegates at the 6th Asian Bird Fair at the Quality Hotel Marlow on 31st October 2015.
Right. So this 6th ASEAN Bird Fair is a regional gathering of these orders of bird clubs, societies from Asia to promote bird watching and also nature tourism in each other's countries as well. And Singapore is hosting for this for the first time, and it was the most appropriate time for the Nature Society in Singapore to make the first claim and also reflect on the wishes of people after 13 long years, of course.
Right.
And that will generate a greater awareness of the nature heritage as well.
And if you are wondering if this was a one-man decision, no, it wasn't. They actually invite the public to vote for the National Bird of Singapore at the Nature Society in Singapore. And out of all the votes that were received, the Crimson Sunbird actually came up tops with 400 votes, which was about 38% compared to 4 other birds that were up nominated as well. And those who voted for the Crimson Sunbird commented that it was small, active, and red, and that is very much befitting the little red dot term coined by the former president of Indonesia for Singapore. That's what Singapore is actually known as well in the international eyes. And the Nature Society of Singapore has also engaged the Ministry of Culture, Community and Youth and other agencies, hoping for their support on this matter.
Yes, and I hope that it can enhance their image as well as to bring up and add more values to their national identity with this bird. Well, let's move on to the next news. news, when we talk about the condominium prices, it's not only Malaysia that we always complain about the prices. When there was just a few days ago, there was this article about perhaps the condominium rental prices will be reduced in near future. However, it looks like Cambodia is struggling a lot when it comes to condominium price nowadays.
I think they're probably pretty much experiencing what Malaysia is experiencing
Right.
at the moment. The problem with a lot of condominiums is that it's usually bought or rented by the expats. And most people who actually even buy this condominium are really, really rich people.
True.
And they don't even stay there. Some of them, of course, rent it out and they use that money to pay it off. Or some people just keep them as a rest house or a guest house where they can go and chill over the weekend and whatnot. And I think this also leads to the problem where there are too many units where people are not even staying in them, and then you have this whole influx of other people who don't have a place to stay, and they definitely cannot afford to stay in these places, in the condos.
Well, you have a point there. Most of buyers are foreigners, and also the trend will change towards the Cambodians, but it will take about 10 to 20 years. That's a pretty long time.
It is.
Yeah, and of course, for the time being, this influx of foreigners over the past few years, as multinational companies open offices, is feeding this demand apparently. And when it comes to Cambodia, the poverty level is pretty high compared to other Southeast Asian countries.
Right.
So it adds to another concern when it comes to this particular area, which is about the price of condominium.
And I think one of the cook, whose name is Hak Hub, would agree with me, because he said that people like us don't like to live in apartments like this, because these apartments are only for the very rich people.
Right.
And he still lives in a wooden home, which is close to a sewage canal, which is pretty sad.
It is, and this is something the government really needs to work on, rather than just developing the whole nation by having a lot of expensive condominiums. So how about all these rural people and as well as low income class people? They're still suffering.
Right.
Yeah. So it is something that and not only Cambodia, whole Southeast Asia as an ASEAN community really needs to come up with a strict policy, and hope that this agreement that we have will be able to solve, perhaps touch a little bit of this, give breath to these problems.
Let's wait for budget 2016 from
Right.
Cambodia, see what allocations the government have for their housing plans.
Sure. So that's it, and that's the end of our ASEAN Dailies. Look for us on our social media channels, Facebook, Instagram, YouTube, and Twitter.
And of course, you can download our very own Durian ASEAN app, so you can listen to us pretty much anywhere and anytime. And don't go anywhere, we have another interview coming up at 9 o'clock later, so listen in for that one.